Well, welcome to Tim's Take, and we're continuing our discussion with Dr. Ben Brown, our extension specialist in row crop economics. And Ben, we've talked about corn and soybean, but wheat has become a minor crop to us. But what are those acres done over the last few years?
Well, we saw a little bit of a rebound in wheat in the
Right.
United States when Russia invaded Ukraine and wheat prices went high, right? We saw relatively high wheat prices, record high wheat prices in some cases. There was some interesting market phenomenons that happened during that period to where the futures market was very high, but the cash market that producers were actually experiencing wasn't following. And so we actually saw some breakdowns in terms of risk management tools on the wheat side. But the high prices for wheat globally and even here in the United States actually brought some acreage back into wheat production. We had some producers that hadn't produced wheat in a number of years that kind of got back into it. We saw people that had wheat expand their wheat acreage. But the long answer, that's the long answer. The short answer is over a long period of time, we have been decreasing wheat in the United States. And
not just Missouri, but the United
States. Everybody's been decreasing wheat. We've replaced a lot of those wheat acres. You think of Kansas, right? The breadbasket, the wheat state, right? A lot of those wheat acres became soybean acres in Kansas. Same thing in North and South Dakota as well. So we've been replacing those acres, and wheat production has just been declining over a long-term period of time. Part of that is because, when it comes to wheat, we do have good quality wheat, but we've also got a lot of feed wheat. And so, if you're feeding wheat, on a relative basis, you can usually buy a bushel of corn cheaper than you can buy a bushel of wheat. And so grain sorghum's now competing with wheat. We've seen grain sorghum compete, and it's a challenge. Wheat's one of those crops that it's as much the profitability of it as a challenge as it is the timing. For when I talk to producers and I ask, well, why don't you plant as much wheat as you used to? And a lot of times the answer is, well, in the fall when we need to plant wheat, we're trying to harvest our corn. And in the spring when we need to be harvesting wheat, we'd really like to be planting soybeans or spraying corn. And so the labor side of wheat just makes it a challenge for most farms. I like wheat. I've always liked wheat. My dad, sometimes I joke, I think my dad plants wheat just because I like wheat. I have very fond childhood memories of harvesting wheat with my grandpa. And so anyways, I hold it kind of near and dear to my heart. But the other, from an economist side, double cropping soybeans behind wheat, in some cases, is our most profitable option for acres. And again, there are challenges. Sometimes you don't get the wheat out in time, and it delays the soybean planting. But broadly speaking, if we can get 35, 40 bushels of soybeans following a decent wheat crop, that's usually a pretty profitable acre for us.
And that has pushed north in Missouri and in other parts of the country that they can double crop soybeans, which is great. Some friends of mine refer to wheat as the landlord crop because the older landlords used to plant wheat and they want to continue to see wheat planted. But as you mentioned, there's other reasons why they don't want to.
Yeah, I can paint a picture as to why wheat has gone out of favor with producers. I get it. I fully understand, and there are people that have made it work, especially if you can bale the straw. There's some good profitability with the straw that comes with it as well. Of course, then you have to add fertilizer back because you've taken some of those nutrients away. But I find wheat to be a great rotation crop to help break some disease cycles, and it fits well into rotations. But for a number of other factors, it's not a crop that people enjoy planting and harvesting. So
when we look at soil health, I was just talking to a graduate student yesterday on some rotation studies, and he mentioned you can really pick out the wheat crop, the wheat rotations, because the soil health indicators are better. Well, so from that standpoint, that's also an advantage.
Yeah, so you're getting to an area quickly here, Tim, that I don't know anything about.
Well, economics, I don't buy high, sell low,
Yeah. I do work with quite a few of our soil scientists. I'm on a couple of projects right now looking at soil health and just different things because, ultimately what I care about is profitability and what we can do to increase profits. And so we look at all these things as well. And so I'm on some of these projects and, It's just like I said, wheat offers some cover, some ground cover in the winter, and it helps provide some nutrients when that crop decays. If we take the straw away, we got to add it back in some way, and
but the cash flow. My dad always liked wheat because of the cash flow that you got in the middle of the summer. That you actually got a crop sold.
There's truth to that too, Tim. I agree. There's a number of things I like about wheat.
Right.
I don't know how I could stand on a rooftop and sing about wheat all I want, and I don't think it's going to change people's mind in Missouri of planting it. So
because of the harvest, planting same time harvest. Is it more of a lower risk but lower reward type crop, or is it about like when you do the budgets of wheat compared to corn and soybean?
Well, that's a great question, because I need to go back and look at this. We have seen probably some stabilization in terms of wheat yields, and I think part of this is the people that are now growing wheat grow wheat, right? They manage wheat, and it is a crop, and they manage it, they spray it, apply fungicide to it. And so we just don't see as much variability in wheat yields as what I think we used to see for wheat. And I think that's showing up in crop yield data. I think that's showing up in crop insurance, premiums. Lower premiums mean that there's not as much variability. And so I think we're seeing all that in there. I don't have a good answer for you in terms of this high risk, high reward, low risk, or high risk. How'd you phrase that? High risk, low reward, I think is how you said it. Something like that.
Or low risk, but lower reward.
Oh, there you go. Low risk, lower reward. Yeah. The risk for wheat, and I kind of alluded to this just a little bit earlier, the risk for wheat is there's been years. This was a year where this was a case to where the wheat just never matured. We were in the end of June when some of the wheat was maturing. It had rained so much that people needed to spray corn. We needed to bale hay in parts of Missouri. We needed to harvest wheat. We needed to plant full season beans, right? And so the risk is the wheat crop comes out late and you don't get the soybean crop planted. It is yet to be determined because we haven't harvested many of those late planted soybeans yet in Missouri, but given the way the drought materialized this year, I actually think some of these later planted soybeans, depending where they are at, hit the drought right at pollination and will struggle. That's why I think the yields are going to decline. Yes. The early planted beans got ahead of pollination and weren't as impacted by the drought, whereas some of these later planted soybeans behind the wheat. So I would maybe say that that's where the risk is you push that soybean planting, and especially if it's going to start and keep getting drier in August, which is what the climatologists all tell me, is that August is going to be a month that just keeps getting drier for us. So
really? Well, yeah, some of these double crop soybeans really didn't see a significant rain.
Did they see any rain?
Not till recently.
I was going to say, we went like 2 months. Yes. I was going to say, we almost went 2 months without any rain,
That's
Tim.
Right. That's right. So, but corn and soybean budgets, how do they look? Because we're hearing that input costs are up 60% in the last 5 years or so, and that's got to blow these budgets apart, doesn't it?
Yeah, your listeners aren't going to like what I have to say. Our early indication for 26 crop is the input costs are higher for 26.
Again.
Anywhere between 1% to 2%, right? Mm-hmm. Somewhere in that mix. And that is not us forecasting. That is just simply taking what we get and what we see from the information. Producers here at the end of the calendar year are going to be making a lot of their seed decisions. A lot of seed companies have already set their market prices for seed. So we take those and look at those, and those are all looking higher to flat at best, frankly. And we could see producers make some decisions. Maybe you buy older traits of seed.
Yes.
And different things that exposes you to other risk if it's got a stacked variety hybrid to it, right? That maybe helps prevent corn rootworm or some of the other diseases we've seen. But that's a management choice producers will have to make. They could cheapen corn decisions, but maybe they're giving up on some of the technology packages. Fertilizer, I think, is going to continue to be a challenge. We've seen fertilizer prices rise. Got maybe a little bit of relief here the last couple of weeks. I think might hang with us for just a little bit. But my early indication is that fertilizer prices are going to heat up again by the time we get around to spring.
We import a lot of fertilizer.
Well, it depends on which fertilizer you talk about. Good economic answer right there. It depends.
That's right.
We produce most of our own nitrogen or anhydrous. We produce most of our own anhydrous. The challenge with anhydrous is that we are in a global fertilizer market. And U.S. anhydrous is the cheapest form of nitrogen on the global market. So we're actually exporting a lot of anhydrous and other products. And so that competes with U.S. producers. Other places around the world are asking for our nitrogen source, and that's what's keeping the price high, even though we produce a lot of it here. UAN is a product we import quite a bit of. It is in tight supply globally, and it's going to remain high. Phosphates have gotten a lot of news. We import a lot of phosphates, and phosphate prices are very high. And so, depending on the product category, potash is one of those that it's high because of everything else. But there's actually a lot of potash production potentially coming to the global market in the next couple of years even. So I'm not as worried about potash as some of the other fertilizer categories. But I certainly think we could see fertilizer prices really rise this winter into the spring.
And anhydrous, it's a very energy-dependent crop, and it takes a lot of natural gas to make it.
Yeah, we've seen natural gases rise a little bit. That's showing up in the ethanol data as well.
So we're competing against that too.
Yeah.
If they could make more money selling it as natural gas, they will.
Sure.
Versus making anhydrous out of it.
We saw that in Europe 2 years ago when natural gas prices in Europe got really high. They sold the natural gas to homes basically for heating and other sources, and shut down some of their industrial production, whether that be fertilizer or even their biofuel sector. And so, that could happen here. I don't know if we'll see a whole lot of fertilizer plants sell their natural gas versus producing fertilizer, because I think the fertilizer prices, the output price is going to be high enough that it's going to continue to encourage production. The biggest thing here is it's just a global market, and anhydrous prices in the U.S. are the cheapest source of nitrogen in the world, and so there's people bidding for the product.
You mentioned in Europe they use the natural gas to heat homes. It's kind of like in California, either use it water for the people to drink or for crops.
Yeah,
you got to start making those decisions, and people are going to win out each time.
Sure, yeah,
have to.
Yep.
So
yeah. So that's my answer. As input costs, at least as where we see it now, continue to put this pressure. We had the appropriations bill passed earlier this summer. The big beautiful bill, the one big beautiful bill that got passed earlier this year. Our early assessment shows that it does increase input cost. The farm safety net programs that were included that in the long run show some increased pressure on upward prices. I think you're hearing a lot of that amongst farming community right now of needing better profitability, but direct payments probably don't necessarily help the producer. They just flow right through to the input provider or the bank and keep input prices high. And our early analysis of at least the one big beautiful bill and some of the other things would certainly suggest that is true.
So what should farmers do? Because I've heard some of them say, 2026, I'm going to plant a crop that I'm going to lose money on.
Many of them did that in 25 as well, and some of them did it in 24, depending on when they bought fertilizer.
Just control input costs is all you can do.
So should is a value judgment, right? Like that's one of those things that I could say, well, you should do this, and somebody else would say, well, no, you should do that, right? Should is an opinion, it's a value judgment. I remember talking down at the Missouri Farm Bureau annual meeting probably 3 years ago. Prices were high. The outlook was for lower prices to come. And I remember quoting a banker that I heard when I was a kid, so 25 years ago, maybe, 30 years ago. I don't know when it was. But I remember the quote almost like it was yesterday. The quote was, be committed when things are bad and be disciplined when things are good, right? And the nature of that comment is that good farm management starts when profitability is strong, right? Not overbidding for cash rents, being smart in terms of what you're spending your money, because eventually the cost structure or the price change, but the cost structure remains, and that's kind of where we're at right now. And so, for everybody, profitability is low to negative, right? Very few people, even it doesn't matter your cost structure, people are struggling. But the ones that I think continue to focus on their cost and think about, how do we diversify? How do we find other forms of revenue for this operation? I think those are the ones that are showing some innovation right now, and innovation is going to be the name of the game. I did a call at a program yesterday with a bunch of interns from across the country. I had one intern from Michigan State University that asked about, well, if you wanted to go back and farm today, what would you do? And my answer was relatively simple. I said, I did. I came out of college during an era where it wasn't very attractive to go back to farming, and I wanted to go back and farm. And what I did is I found that I could do an extension job and be connected with production agriculture that fed my desire to do that, but I was helping make a living for myself, right? And so that was kind of the answer. But then I turned and I said, well, today, if I was graduating today and looking at some of the farm pressure that we see, you can buy some equipment relatively cheap compared to where it was, right? Equipment prices have really come off. There's some great interest rate programs through the federal government, through the Farm Credit System, through some commercial banks. Here in Missouri, we have the MoBucks program, to where you can use low interest rate and go out and buy equipment and start a custom farming business. Takes a lot of the risk of the production side off the table, but you're involved in production ag and doing a custom farming business. Now that comes with marketing costs, right? Or marketing, you got to be a good marketer, because you're no different than other service providers like an accounting firm or a tax firm, right? Like, you're trying to get business, so you got to market. You got to be a good marketer. And the second thing is you got to be a good employer, basically a good business partner. Show up on time. If you tell somebody you're going to plant their corn on a certain day, you better plant it, right? Or at least be transparent about what you didn't plant, right? So it comes with different challenges, but that's some of the innovation that I think exists out there. Certainly, we've got people in Southeast Missouri that are trying to grow canola during the winter season, and that's innovation in terms of getting some more additional money out of each available acre that's out there. We see people looking at agritourism, pumpkin patches, wedding barns, right? We see people doing that. It has risk, right? You got legal risk, you got human resource risk that you didn't have before. But certainly those are some of the innovative things that I think people are trying to figure out how to just survive this downturn.
Is there any one crop that's probably a little more profitable? Or are we all?
Sorry, I shouldn't. I'm sure there is. They're all pretty bleak.
Yes,
frankly, the most profitable combination is some type of winter crop, whether that be canola or wheat, followed by a soybean crop. That's the most profitable combination that's out there. Right now, corn, actually, probably.
Which is so surprising with the high input cost.
Yeah, with high input cost structure, probably corn. If you're in a market where you can get rid of grain sorghum and sell grain sorghum for a niche product, maybe poultry or bird feed, or there's some areas where you use sorghum for mill. They mill it and make a kind of a sorghum type of flour or whatever. Pop sorghum is another example. If you've got some of those niches, sorghum can be, because it's a low input crop and you can generate some returns there. But truthfully, Tim, none of our products on the row crop side need more acres, or even the current acres where we're at. We need to, we got to have some type of supply shock here, I think, to get higher prices.
Right. Whether it's a weather event or hope not a war across the globe.
We need some type of supply shock, right?
Yes.
Preferably somewhere other than the United States, right? That would be, for our producers, that would be preferable.
Because I know my brother in 2019, the fall of 2019, was really bearish on economics of farming. It was not going to look good, and then we had COVID.
Yep, and COVID kind of created some interesting dilemmas in terms of scarcity. We also had a couple of short crops in there, actually. Multiple years of drought here in the United States and a prime growing region, and multiple years of short crops in South America as well. That all just kind of compounded at the same time. So a supply shock is probably what it's going to take. However, so when you get into periods like this, right, low farm income, and I talk about the innovation, you start hearing calls for different type of demand uses, right? E15, year-round E15 is one of those things that's being called for right now. Earlier this year, we saw the U.S. EPA actually propose higher volumes for biomass-based diesel, and upwards of 30% increase in stuff. Now that hasn't become official. They proposed it. There was a comment period. We're awaiting the EPA's official ruling. But you could assume that would increase the demand for soybean oil and soybeans. Same thing E15 would do for corn, ethanol and corn demand. And, we've heard about the 45Z tax credits. That creates an opportunity for a differentiated market. You got to capture and record what your management practices are to generate those tax credits, but that could be potentially an increased revenue source as well. So,
or selling carbon credits.
Right? That's, it's interesting. The carbon market, we knew would go through ups and downs, and some of your viewers are probably sitting there saying, no, he didn't. That guy didn't know that these. But every market goes through ups and downs. Yes. Look at ethanol. Look at renewable fuels. Every market, when it's developed and goes through ups and downs. Where I think the carbon market is right now is it's in a regrouping stage. It's regrouping, and it's trying to figure out, okay, how do we've had the early adopters and we've had the early shocks. Okay, what does a base start to look like moving forward? And so to me, this is an exciting. This is a time for the future of carbon markets to kind of get developed.
Sure. Just like anything else.
Yep. Just like every other market has gone through this.
Right.
Yep.
You look at when tractors first came out, there was 25 different styles out there. Then they all get down to 2 or 3. So, all right. Well, anything you want to end with on this? I mean, it's not all bleak. I mean, like you said, be disciplined when times are good, and stay on task when. Yeah,
we didn't talk about cattle. I'm not a livestock economist.
Right.
But you want to talk about positives, right? Like the positives on the cattle side in Missouri right now. But I'll end. You said it's not all bleak, and I'll end with this because I find myself as I work with producers, and I give 80 talks a year around Missouri. I find myself in a very interesting spot right now. And it really starts 2 years ago. I was depressed. Every farmer meeting I went to 2 years ago, I left the meeting feeling like I didn't help anybody, and I just made them all sad because the outlook in my eyes was prices were heading lower, and we were going to really enter into this financial crunch. And that's largely what happened. However, producers weren't there yet, right? They weren't feeling it 2 years ago. They're feeling it now. And so I find myself in this weird spot when I actually look out 2 years from now, I see higher prices and better profitability 2 years from now. And so from that standpoint, I can be optimistic about it. The problem is we're facing the pain now.
Yes.
And producers are hurting now. And so even though, I say, hey, things in my price forecast, I've actually got green for next year. Prices are actually higher next year than they are now, but we got to get there first.
But we got to get through this.
We got to get through there first.
4 billion bushel corn crop.
We got to get to the 26 crop, and I think we've got some opportunities. So.
All right. Well, thanks so much, Ben. And I know this is such great information for everybody.
Yep. Thanks, Tim.
This is it for Tim's Take, and we'll see you next time.